Kopi Jana Balaba Grivanadari Kopi Jana Balaba Grivanadari Yasodanana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tirha Vanacharya Yamuna Tirha Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Prabhupada Hare Śrīmad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Smaraj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Harival, glorious to the sound devotees, all glorious to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Oma Gyanativanandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Pandeham Shiguro Shiyuta Parakamalam Shigurum Vaishnavam Scha Shirupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Vrajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakanzvitam Scha Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchena Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishubhanu Siddhadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Trivyascha Kripa Sindhuvyevacha Patiranam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitinanda Shadvaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 1, The Advent of Lord Krishna, the Introduction, text number 33, is that what's on the board? 30 is on the board. 33. No purport. For some reason we write the verses without purports. Prabhupada didn't give lectures on verses without purports. And therefore, we're learning the Sanskrit here. Supposedly by the time we've gotten up to the 10th canto, we already know by heart, memorize all the other 9 cantos. Anyone here has memorized all the 9 cantos in the Sanskrit and English? Well, anyhow, that's why we're reading the Sanskrit and repeating it. Anyhow, I'm just going to read the translation, and then I'll just read through. Yeah, that's just the translation. O beloved son, Maharaj Parikshit, when the bride and bridegroom were ready to start, conch shells, bugles, drums, and kettle drums all vibrated in concert for the auspicious departure. So what should we be doing when we're hearing this? Anyone know? Besides sitting there. Any idea what we should be doing when we hear it? Should we be doing anything? Just wait for the verse to get over? So, now, every word in the Bhagavatam is important. Anyone know why it's important, every word? What's that? Yes, everything is related to Krishna, but the Bhagavatam reveals the relationship. So here it says, O beloved son. So whose son? Son of who? Maharaj Parikshit. Who's his son? Who's his father? Parikshit Maharaj. Abhimanyu. O beloved son. Who's talking here? Yes, Sukadeva Goswami. So when we hear, so what should we be doing when we're hearing this verse? What should we be remembering? What's that? Yeah, well, what's happening? What should we be seeing within our heart? Shukadeva Goswami is sitting there somewhere on the bank of the Ganges. Parikshit Maharaj is hearing from him, so we should be remembering them. And then there is all the sages who are gathered there. So what happens if we don't remember this? We'll find it very boring here in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. It'll seem like an ordinary book, not much to it. But if we remember this pastime, visualize Shukadeva Goswami. What color is Shukadeva Goswami? What's that? Someone said green? Blue, yeah, kind of like Krishna. Something like that. And then, what is he dressed in? What's that? He doesn't have anything on. That we don't have to meditate on. But he's sitting cross-legged, so it doesn't make it. And he's sitting there, and Parikshit Maharaj, what is his mood? Is he kind of like falling asleep, waiting for the class to get over? Checking his watch? When is this class going to go over? I'm hungry. What is his mood? We're in the 10th canto. How long has he been sitting there now? What's that? He's been sitting there for a while. He hasn't been eating, he hasn't been sleeping, he's just sitting in there and listening. So what is his mood? What's that? Yeah, he's in ecstasy. He's actually visualizing, he's actually in the pastime. Otherwise, it's not possible to sit for a conditioned soul, to sit there for 6 days or 7 days and just hear something unless he's in some other world, spiritual world. When the bride, who's the bride? What's that? Devaki. Yeah, so what does Devaki look like? Does she have jeans on, or how is Devaki dressed? How are you going to imagine Devaki? What's that? What does that look like? What does it look like? She has a sari on, jewelry, nice hair, maybe garlands in her hair. She looks very attractive. And the bridegroom, what does the bridegroom look like? Some hippie? What does the bridegroom look like? I mean, we have to use our intelligence to make a proper image. How many types of deities are there? Does anyone know? Does anyone know how many types of deities there are? Can anyone name one type of deity? Anyhow, there's made out of earth, made out of wood, made out of metal, marble. All these are more or less. And then there's made out, within the mind, there's also the deity. So we have to establish the deity within our mind based on what? Based on scripture. Now, and who's giving us the intelligence to do it? Are we creating it ourselves? Or Krishna is giving us intelligence? Yeah, Krishna is giving us remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So if we imagine Devaki to be, some hippie or something, that wouldn't, Krishna is not giving us that intelligence. But he's giving us the intelligence according to the culture that we understand. She's dressed in a sari, he's dressed as a king, Vasudeva. With a kingly outfit, a crown or something on his head. And then they're ready to start. And there's conch shells. So we have to hear a conch shell within our brain. Is that so hard? People, they go through the life hearing that Mick Jagger, I can't get any satisfaction. Certainly we can hear a conch shell. Or bugles. We've all heard a bugle, right? So hear the sound of a bugle. What's the difference between hearing ordinary sounds like a conch shell or a bugle and remembering it by hearing this pastime? Is there any difference? One is spiritual, because it comes from the Shastra, and the other is completely material, because it comes from one's own imagination or someone else's imagination. Has no relationship with Shastra. And then there's drums. So we can hear the conch shell, the bugle, the drums, the kettle drums, all vibrate in concert for their auspicious departure. So that's a lot more exciting here in the Bhagavatam that way, isn't it? It's not, and we just think. Then if we read the Sanskrit, Sankhya, Turiya, Mridangya, Cha, Shanka, the conch shells, the Turiya, the bugles, Mridangas. So then when we hear the Sanskrit, Sankhya, Turiya, Mridangas, Cha, then we can actually, when we hear the sound, Sankhya, then we hear the conch shell. It's not just memorizing some verse for the sake of memorizing the verse. It's actually hearing and experiencing a conch shell. Hearing the Turiya, hearing the bugle sounding within our brain, within our consciousness. Actually, it's the spiritual soul who's hearing it. And hearing the mridangas playing. Then it's actually quite blissful reading the verse. Memorizing the verses in heart. Shankas, Turiya, Mridangas, Cha. Then it's not like a big thing, I got to remember this verse. No, it's actually an experience rather than just a rote memory. Made or vibrated. So, now let's go into the other verse. Panti pragrahinam kamsam abhyasya sariravak anyas tvam ashtamo garbo hantayam vahase buddha. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. While Kamsa controlling the reins of the horses, so again, we should be seeing Kamsa big person. And he's on a chariot, he's controlling the horses, he's driving the chariot on the way. So we can see Devaki, Vasudeva on this beautiful golden chariot, Kamsa is driving it with these beautiful horses, and on the way, an unexpected voice, unembodied voice addressed him. "You fool rascal, the eighth child of this woman you are carrying will kill you." So we have to hear the voice from the demigods, loudly proclaiming that the eighth child is going to kill Kamsa. So just imagine what Kamsa felt. So this should be alive, the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam should be alive within us. And if the Bhagavatam is alive within us, then we won't be dead anymore. Otherwise, if the Bhagavatam is not alive within us, we're as good as dead. Purport. The omen spoken of Ashtamo Garbha, referring to the eighth pregnancy, but it did not clearly say whether the child was to be a son or a daughter. Even if Kamsa were to see that the eighth child of Devaki was a daughter, he should have no doubt that the eighth child was to kill him. So this is significant that later on we'll find out that we keep on hearing that the eighth child of Devaki was Krishna, and that the child born of Yasoda was Yogamaya, Subhadra. But who else was born of Yogamaya, of Yasoda? Yeah, they were twins. Not identical twins, but they were twins. So Krishna was born as the eighth child of Yasoda, as the child of Yasoda, and at the same time, Devaki gave birth to Vasudeva Krishna. And then when Vasudeva took Vasudeva Krishna, when he turned into a baby, what happened on the way? Did Vasudeva Krishna ever make it to Vrindavan? Yeah, I guess he made it to Vrindavan. But on the way, what's that? Yeah, they went through the Jamuna, and what happened to Vasudeva Krishna? He dropped him. He dropped him in the water. And did he stay in the water? Yeah, he did stay in the water. So how do we know he stayed in the water? Because when Akrura came back with Krishna, then he went into the Jamuna and he saw Vasudeva Krishna was there. He was still there, surrounded by the associates. So he was still there, and then he got back on the chariot, and he saw that Krishna was there, but it wasn't Krishna anymore. It was Vasudeva Krishna, because Krishna never leaves Vrindavan. I guess Mathura is Vrindavan. No, Mathura is not Vrindavan. He never leaves Vrindavan. So it was actually Vasudeva Krishna who went to Mathura, not Krishna, the original Krishna. Otherwise, Krishna doesn't change his mood. One day he's dancing with Śrīmad Radharani, and then he gets a little angry the next day and he kills Kamsa. He changes his mood. So you never know who you're dealing with. If you dance in the wrong step, Krishna might get angry and you're in trouble. No, Krishna always has the same mood. But his expansions also have the same mood, but they have different functions. In other words, it's not that Vasudeva is envious of Kamsa, he hates Kamsa, and just waiting for the opportunity to kill him eternally. He just take... No, Krishna, Vasudeva Krishna, is also, he knows, he's not like he's in Maya, Vasudeva Krishna. Who is this Kamsa? He knows he's one of the gatekeepers. And he's eternally a devotee of Krishna. And Krishna has arranged this pastime by putting Kamsa, actually it's Shishupal and Dantavakra. Anyhow, Kamsa was Kalanimi in his last lifetime, and he got killed by Krishna just so he can come back here and have this pastime. So Krishna knows that these are all my eternal servants. So he shows anger, but his anger is transcendental. He beats on Kamsa because Kamsa is threatening his devotee. So to teach Kamsa, you should be favorable towards my devotee, he beats on him to teach him a lesson so he can become a devotee also. He's just trying to beat devotion into him. It's called hard love. So all this, the more we see the background and remember it, then we won't get bewildered that this is some kind of just a demon riding Devaki and Vasudeva. Could you imagine if we had the opportunity to be on a chariot and riding Devaki and Vasudeva, and even hearing this unembodied voice from the demigods? I mean, wouldn't that be auspicious? Even if you were Kamsa, it would be auspicious. It's not so easy to become a demon like Kamsa. Get the opportunity to ride two great devotees, Vasudeva and Devaki, on a chariot on their marriage day, and he's hearing the transcendental conch shells and everything. So there's a lot more going on than just, if we don't understand the background behind it, it seems just quite ordinary. But if we understand the whole background, then everything becomes extraordinary. The omen spoke of Atma. Oh, sorry. So, and here it says, Kamsa was affectionate towards his sister, therefore he had become the chariot driver to carry her and his brother-in-law to their home. So, even demons are affectionate. Everyone is actually a spirit soul, and affection is natural. Unfortunately, we have affection for this gross and subtle material bodies that we come in contact with. So love has to be there, because it's our very nature to love. The question is what we're going to love. To love Krishna and the other spiritual personalities in relation with Krishna is quite auspicious. To love dead bodies is not very auspicious. So Kamsa was a condemned personality in the Bhoja dynasty because he was envious and sinful. Therefore, upon hearing this omen from the sky, he caught hold of his sister's hair with his left hand, took up his sword with his right hand to sever her head from her body. Such is affection in the material world. Could you imagine if your mother was very intolerant and one day she's feeding you prasadam very affectionately, and you say something wrong, she takes a sword and is going to cut your head off? You'd wonder about the level of her affection, deepness of her affection for you. It can change at every moment. In America, they have around 500 murders every week. It's a big country. And most of them, 90% of them, are between family members. So much is love in the family. Kamsa was driving the chariot, purport. Kamsa was driving this chariot, controlling the reins with his left hand. But as soon as he heard the omen that his sister's 8th child would kill him, he gave up the reins, caught hold of his sister's hand, and with his right hand took up a sword to kill her. At least he was going to kill her with his right hand. So maybe that's not as auspicious as being killed with her left hand. Before he had been so affectionate that he was acting as his sister's chariot driver. But as soon as he heard that his self-interest or his life was at stake, he forgot all affection for her, immediately became a great enemy. This is the nature of demons. No one should trust a demon. Despite any amount of affection, aside from this, a king, a politician, or a woman cannot be trusted, since they can do anything abominable for their personal interest. Chanaka Pandit therefore says, Vishvaso naiva kartavyam strishu raja kuleshu cha. So now we're entering into the controversies of modern society. That love and affection doesn't exist in the material world. Real love and affection. Of course, love and affection is there. Otherwise, no one would stay in the material world. As Prabhupada gives a story that one man, he was being preached to by a priest. And the priest said, I heard that you're drinking alcohol. You know that if you drink alcohol, you're going to go to hell. So the man said, but my mother drinks alcohol. So she's going to go to hell. But my father also drinks alcohol. So he's going to go to hell. But my brothers and sisters all drink alcohol. Well, they're all going to go to hell. But all my friends drink alcohol. So they're going to hell. So the Prabhupada said the conclusion is, if all my friends, my brothers and sisters, all my relatives, my father and mother are in hell, then hell is heaven. So we try to get affection from others because that's our nature, Satchitananda. But everyone is in this material world just an object for a materialist, an object to get something from. And when we stop getting something from it, it's like bubble gum. Anyone here ever chew bubble gum? At least one devotee chose. So when you chew bubble gum, there's some sugar in it. But after the sugar goes out, then you're just working your jaws. And what do you usually do? You spit it out. So everyone is, therefore, Prahaladananda said, Punak punas charvata charvananam. There's some, or he says, Adantago bira vichatam tamizram, punak punas charvata charvananam. So adantago bira, we're driven to get some sweetness in the material world, chew on something to get the sweetness, and once we get the sweetness out, we spit it out. So everyone is advertising how sweet they are so someone can chew on them. And after they chew on you for a while, there's no more sweetness and they just spit you out. What did you do? Well, you wanted me to chew on you. I took out all the sugar and there's nothing left, so I spit you out. Only the cows are so bewildered. The sugarcane vendor is making the sugarcane. Make sure he cleans out the sugarcane machine before you take the sugarcane, or else you'll get some extra protein because a lot of flies come by. And he also will squeeze out the flies. So generally speaking, at least in the beginning of the day, you see the sugarcane vendor, he's throwing some water on the machine, get out all the extra flies. So he makes the sugarcane, he sells the sugarcane, and then he throws the sugarcane that's been squeezed, and he squeezes a lot of times. He's going to get every drop he can. India, they don't want to waste anything. And then he throws it away, dry sugar, and the cow comes along and says, oh, sugarcane, free sugarcane. Puts it in his mouth and goes, tries to squeeze one drop out of the sugarcane, and then spits it out. Another cow comes along, oh, sugarcane, free sugarcane, and puts it in his mouth. So all day long the cows are chewing on the sugarcane, trying to squeeze some drop out of it, and then spitting it out. This is called punak punascharvata charvanana, chewing the chewed. So that's the material world. Everyone starts out young and healthy, a lot to chew on for some time. When it's no longer so healthy and young anymore, And still someone will come along and chew on you for a while, but not for so long, and then spit you out. And at the end, people look at you and think, no more juice left, forget it. Not worth it. So we have, the material world is a whole advertisement of romance. Without that, nothing goes on. Everyone is saying, I am your Romeo. I am your Juliet. Let's get together and chew on each other for a while. And previously there was some culture, so even if there was no sugar left, still people would stay together. As long as the lady knew how to cook, it was okay. There was some juice to get some. But nowadays, we're going to chew it. They don't even bother getting married anymore because it's understood. I'm going to chew on you for some time, and then one of you or myself, we're just going to spit you out. I'll spit you out, or you'll spit me out, and find someone else to chew on for some time. So, this is a 10th canto of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, giving us some idea that demons, there are people called demons, and they don't necessarily have two horns and a tail. That's what a demon means. A demon means one who's not conscious of Krishna, one who doesn't follow Shastra, at least trying to become conscious of Krishna. That's called a demon. And here it mentions, in the category similar to demons, are that you can't trust in that respect, are women and politicians. Now, politicians, there won't be any question, everyone will agree on that. No, half the audience here would probably be a little, wait a second. Are you, Bhagavatam saying that no one can trust me? So a devotee went to Prabhupada and said, one lady went to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, are women really less intelligent? And Prabhupada said, if you think you're a woman, then you're less intelligent. So anyone who identifies themselves with this gross and subtle body, just like I think we read another verse the other day, and it mentions about women or something like that, and men who are less intelligent, Vaishyas, whatever, Shudras. So the point is that in this age, everyone is less intelligent. Everyone has the propensity to identify themselves with this gross and subtle body. But that's all right. It's not like I become a demon just because I'm identifying myself with this gross and subtle body. It just means that my propensity to act according to Shastra is greater. Because when I identify myself with this gross and subtle body, then there's a fight that goes on. A fight either to do service to Krishna, at least if we're trained up for service to Krishna, and the fight to gratify my senses. And unless we advance in Krishna consciousness, it's just like here in Australia, you have crocodiles. And I've been to a crocodile park in Cairns. Not very exciting, it's pretty boring watching those poor crocodiles. They're really in the mode of ignorance. I don't know what people go to see. I guess to see their next birth or something. Shopping around, which body do I want? Anyhow, sometimes you see these big people, they go and then they clamp down the jaw of the crocodile to show how strong they are. But the crocodile's jaws are quite strong. They can rip your arm apart just by one. Little music for entertainment. But the thing is, if you go into a crocodile pit and you clap down the crocodile's jaws, you can only hold it for some time. And you better be quick when you can't hold it anymore. The crocodile is not very kind, because if he grabs hold of your arm, your arm is finished. So similarly, if only we learn from the Hare Krishna movement that these four regular principles we should follow, but we don't follow Krishna consciousness, then we'll be, by our simply determination and will, however strong or not so strong it is, then as soon as we let go, immediately the senses will grab us. We don't even know what happened. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is not supposed to have a beginning and an end. It's supposed to be eternal. It's internally engaged. But it's not so easy when we're in the material identification. That's called sadhana bhakti, bhajana kriya, anartha nivritti. Now, bhajana kriya is necessary so that we stay above the modes of material nature. It's like if you're in an ocean and you're drowning in the ocean, it's very unpleasant. But if you get 1 inch above the ocean, then you're no longer suffering by drowning. But there's a tendency at any moment you may drop back into the ocean. Therefore, there's certain anxiety about dropping back into the ocean. But if you get lifted higher and higher out of the ocean, then you become more and more secure that I'm not going to drop back into the ocean. So similarly, bhajana kriya is necessary, otherwise we're just going to drop into the ocean. But on the other hand, in anartha nivritti, we feel that we're getting out of the ocean, and therefore the fear, the anxiety of dropping back into the ocean diminishes. So similarly, anyone in the material world who's in a body, and especially in Kali Yuga, it's not so easy to become liberated. Therefore, we find that even some of our leaders, sometimes the Hare Krishna movement, most of the devotees, they just imagine that I have a leader, he must be a Mahabhagavat, he must be perfect, or else I just reject him. Because I'm such a great soul, I deserve the highest devotee to be my leader. And then if we find any fault, real and imaginary, because it's very easy to find fault, even Ramachandra Puri found fault in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what to speak of ourselves. One devotee went to Srila Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, they're all criticizing me. So Prabhupada said, well, they criticize Lord Chaitanya. So the devotee didn't understand what Prabhupada was. He said, but Prabhupada, they're criticizing me. And Prabhupada said, well, they're criticizing Lord Chaitanya. What do you expect? You're in the material world. That as soon as you come here because of our effulgence, everyone's going to surrender to us and tell us how nice we are all the time. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was exhibiting an effulgence greater than that of 10 million suns, and they all thought, and all these Mayavadi sannyasis thought he was just an ordinary sannyasi, poor sannyasi, sitting in the place where they washed their feet. So Prahaladananda Saraswati came to offer this fallen sannyasi, exhibiting the effulgence more than 10,000 suns, his hand to help this poor guy out of his depression. And they were criticizing him for dancing and chanting. Later on, of course, when he heard from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, not only he heard the philosophy, but the power behind Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's speaking was such that the Mayavadi sannyasis, they converted into devotees, or at least some kind of devotee. So we have to understand that it's not so easy to be a liberated soul, to be on the transcendental platform. Nor can we expect that every leader we have within the society is going to be on the transcendental platform. Or that every lady is always going to be exactly on the transcendental platform, or every man is going to be on the transcendental platform. It's like a child. You have a child and they're learning to walk, and they fall down. The parents, hopefully they don't say, hey, you rascal, this is the second time you've tried to walk. I did it the first time. You're an embarrassment. We're filming this, you know what? This is live on YouTube. Get it together, kid. I'm only 1 year old. Hey, don't talk back. No, if they fall down, the parents, they're just happy he made an effort. And they encourage him, to get up and try again. And I just say, hey, you fell down, forget it, get out of here. We're going to try and get another kid who doesn't fall down the first time. No, they encourage him to stand up and walk. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada had chastised one of his disciples for making some mistake. And when the other disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada heard that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada had chastised this devotee, they all rejected him. Our spiritual masters rejected you, we're going to reject you also. And when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur heard this, he became very disturbed. He said, I'm the spiritual master, I rejected him, but I expected you to show him some mercy. It's like Krishnadas, who was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's servant, on his trip to South India, and Krishnadas got allured by the Bhadaharis, who were thinking, what a rascal, he's with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He got allured by a woman, this is ridiculous. How is this possible? He was actually a demon in disguise. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, out of his mercy, he went to the Bhadaharis and dragged Krishnadas by his hair out of the association of the Bhadaharis. Of course, the Bhadaharis were not very happy, and they came to attack Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said, well, we're all Brahmins, you're a Brahmin, I'm a Brahmin, let's get along. But they were very angry, so they took their weapons and they were going to kill Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But the weapons fell out of their hand and cut themselves to pieces. In any case, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishnadas got back to Jagannath Puri, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called Krishnadas and said, you rascal, I reject you. You're in my association, and you left it, so I reject you. But when the associates, headed by Nityananda, heard that, they became compassionate to Krishnadas and engaged him in service. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was expected, and sent him to Navadvip with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's remnants and remnants of Jagannath Puri, of Lord Jagannath, with messages about Lord Chaitanya, and he got an opportunity to see Advaita-Acharya and Sachi Devi and all the other. If we got rejected by Lord Chaitanya and we got a chance to see Advaita-Acharya directly, and Sachi Mata and all the other devotees, and we wouldn't think, well, this is really terrible. No, he's very merciful. So we're all eternal servants of Krishna, and until we get to the platform of Nishta, of complete liberation from the material concept of life, our whole life is a mistake. Our whole conditioned life is a mistake. But when we perform devotional service in this body, then that's perfect. It's no longer we're doing mistaken activities. These are perfect activities as long as we're at least chanting Hare Krishna. And when we mature the chanting, then we'll be able to perform more steady devotional service. And then when we do that even steady devotional service, then we'll get a taste for devotional service. It won't just be an effort, it'll be spontaneous. And it'll actually produce ecstatic emotions within ourselves, and we'll enjoy devotional service. But now, we have so many different things we've got used to enjoying, and we have a tendency to go back and try them out, chew it once more, see if there's any sweetness left there. And then when we find out there's not so much sweetness, we get back to our sadhana bhakti again. So we have to be a little tolerant. And at the same time, look for good examples. It's not like everyone is as fallen as I am, there's no good example. Either you're fallen or either you're a demon or a devotee. Either you're a completely pure devotee that I can emulate, and then when I find out there's any default, then I spit you out, you rascal, you pretender. I surrender to you. I was admiring you, I was following you, and now I'm seeing there's some error within you, and therefore I reject you, and advertise to everyone, watch out for this demon. He looks like a devotee. He chants Hare Krishna. He seems to follow the principles. He even reads Bhagavatam. He knows the philosophy. But I found out, actually, he was a demon. Now, Prabhupada does mention there are Kali Chelas, so that we have to observe. Sometimes devotees do come to the Hare Krishna movement with alternative motive, but that's not so common. We shouldn't look around and see, are you a Kali Chela? You seem to be chanting Hare Krishna, you seem to be pretty steady in devotional service, you even seem to be enjoying it sometimes. But are you actually a devotee? Are you actually a Kali Chela? Are you a demon in disguise? No, we have to, even the demons in disguise, they may be good, they may be someone that we can exemplify also, that we should follow. At least they're disguising themselves, just like in Krishna's pastimes. There was one demon named Vatsasura. He disguised himself as a calf and entered into the pastimes of Krishna and stole Krishna's cowherd boys and threw them into a cave and sealed the cave. But Krishna wound up killing him, so that was good for him. He was a pretender, he was a demon, but he got the mercy of Krishna by being killed by him. On the other hand, our business is not to try to figure out what everyone's doing wrong, although we should know what people are doing wrong so we don't follow and do the wrong thing. We should also try and see what they're doing right and appreciate that. And if we have an opportunity, then we should try to help them get better in what they're doing, if that's possible, or cooperate with them so that both of us can get better in what they're doing, what we're doing. And if not, then we should at least respect them for what they're doing right and not associate with them so closely so that we wind up criticizing them for anything that they're doing wrong. It's not like we see someone doing something wrong and we think, well, it's all divine, whatever the devotee does is good, even he's, going to a nightclub or going to the bar or whatever. Certainly, he didn't seem to have any books in his hand, but I'm sure he's going there to preach. There's one devotee told me, he said, some other devotee was, to be friends with him, he would always go to the movies with him. That kind of friendship we don't need. In other words, we don't have to follow the wrong example. We don't have to participate in the wrong example. But nor should we completely reject the devotee because there's some wrong examples, or sometimes he does something wrong, that we should try to see what he's doing right and appreciate that, and if necessary, don't intimately associate with the devotee, so we wind up going to the bar with him. Unless it's distributed books, but even that may be a little dangerous sometimes. I was talking to one devotee who was a very successful devotee distributing, especially paintings. And he was telling me about, he was making millions of dollars a year. So he was telling me that when he'd go to his client, because he would be making, sometimes selling paintings, $60,000, selling paintings to rich clients, but they'd invite him to take a little, I don't know what they call it here, a copa, little drink with them. So he'd do that. Because he knew that if, as soon as you're drinking with someone, especially from certain parts of the world, then you're an intimate associate with them, because you're drinking together. So as soon as you're an intimate associate, then, he gave them a deal, although he didn't, he was reluctant to do it. Only for $60,000 he can have all these paintings. They think, well, this is my friend, he's giving me a special deal. We just drank together, so, okay. $60,000 for them was just like, they broke their piggy bank to get it, to pay for the paintings. But that's not a good idea. in order to get some Lakshmi to fall into Maya, it's not worth it. So on the other hand, it's not that we reject this devotee because he did amazing service for the movement, but we don't follow his example of how to become so-called successful in your service. There's success, but there's going to be some kind of problems along with that success also. And also the result is, when we collect money like that, by such association, generally speaking, we're not powerful enough, even when we try to employ it in Krishna's service without getting, there's some reaction from such money we get. Because our mentality has a lot to do with what the results will be of our service. Anyhow, so here, the point is that women, Prabhupada said that women are by nature less intelligent, but then again in Kali Yuga, men are by nature pretty less intelligent too. It's a pretty competition who's on the bottom in Kali Yuga. So we shouldn't be so proud. Hey, lady, I'm a brahmachari. Fall down. Touch my feet. Maybe you'll become a brahmachari in the next lifetime too. And if you touch my feet, maybe I'll become a lady, a Mataji, in my next lifetime. No, we shouldn't be so proud. We should understand that anyone who's performing devotional service is under the divine energy. And everyone has an equal opportunity to perform devotional service and avoid materialistic consciousness. Everyone has an equal opportunity. So we should encourage each other to do that. Criticizing, or false prestige, whatever, anyone who has that, then they're simply going to find themselves in the same position that they're criticizing. Whatever we think of at the time of death, that's the position, that's the form we take in our next lifetime. So the last example I'll give is two renunciates were walking along and they came to a river. And before crossing the river, one old lady came along and said, "Can you help me cross the river?" So one young renunciate, he took her on his back and he helped her cross the river. And when they got to the other side, he put her down and she went on her way. And the other renunciate, when they walked on further, some kilometers later, he said, "I can't believe it. You carried a woman on your back. I can't believe it." So the other renunciate said, "Yes, I carried her for a few yards across the river, and then I put her down. But you've been carrying her for kilometers now." So we have to avoid this type of mentality. Otherwise, we'll get into trouble. We have to see things properly. Not that everything is all right, but not that everything is necessarily the way immediately we see it. We have to see things more carefully, so we remain utsaha, enthusiastic, and we appreciate what the devotees are doing, which is positive, which is good. And especially the pure devotees, if we criticize them, then our devotional service is finished, temporarily at least. Even Bilavangal Thakur, who was practically on the platform of Bhava, he was on the platform of Bhava, actually, it said. And then somehow or another, by some offense against a devotee, he fell down and got involved in his next lifetime with a prostitute. Prostitute doesn't mean that necessarily he was paying for her, but girlfriends in the Vedic culture were considered prostitutes. Nowadays they're considered partners. So he was so attached to Chintamani that at his father's funeral, he kept on telling the priest, hurry up, get this over with, I gotta, he didn't tell her I have to see Chintamani, but he just rushed the whole funeral. And then this big storm came up, flooding the whole region, and he went through the storm, got to Chintamani's house, which had a big wall around it. The door was locked, because Chintamani never thought that Bilamangal would come in such a horrible weather. And so he decided, I got to get over there to see Chintamani. So he found a rope, and he climbed up on the rope, and then he found out the rope wasn't a rope, it was a dead snake. Climbed Sorch and Taman, and she was shocked. What are you doing here? So he said, well, you know, I'm in love with you, whatever he told her. He said, she said, if you had as much love for Krishna as you have for me, then you'd become a liberated soul very quickly. And then he realized that this is my spiritual master talking to me through my girlfriend, and he immediately left and went to Vrindavan. And then we know the rest of the story, how he took his eyes out. He was really determined to get to Vrindavan and become a devotee of Krishna. So, this is our situation, and we should appreciate that even when we get to the platform of bhava, we may have something to learn. So what to speak of our present situation, but we should learn something along the way. And the most important thing to do is to appreciate whatever the devotees are doing in terms of actually following Krishna consciousness, whoever they are, and appreciate them, and try to assist them. And if they get into some difficulty sometimes, then we just pray to Krishna or try to help them somehow or another come back to their position of Krishna consciousness so they can make their forward steps to go back to Krishna. And the last example I'll give is Dhruva Maharaj and his brother Uttama. His mother was Suniti and his stepmother was Suruchi. So Dhruva Maharaj wanted to get on the lap of his father, and Suruchi told him, get off the lap. You can't sit on the lap of your father because you're not born from my womb. So if you want to sit on the lap of your father, then you should pray to Lord Vishnu that you should die immediately, and in the next lifetime you can take birth from my womb, and then you could actually become eligible to sit on the lap of your father. Unfortunately, Uttamapada was a little insensitive to Dhruva Maharaj at that time, and he didn't protest, and Dhruva Maharaj left, and he was quite angry, and we know the story. Eventually he became a pure devotee through great austerity. Inspired, of course, by Suruchi. In other words, unless Suruchi had done that, Dhruva Maharaj would never have made it into the Bhagavatam. So he owed eternal debt to Suruchi. Unfortunately, later on, after, of course, Dhruva Maharaj came back and Suruchi and Uttama were very happy to see him. King Uttamapada was very happy. He felt quite guilty when he heard about how Dhruva Maharaj was in the forest trying to do this austerity. He was thinking how hard-hearted I was, etc. So there was lamentation, there was forgiveness, there was ecstatic reunion, everything was there. But later on, Uttama went into the forest and was killed by some yakshas. And his mother, Suruchi, went crazy, went into the forest looking for her son, Uttama, and she was burned to death by a forest fire. So our commentary has said that actually this is due to their sinful reactions for offending Dhruva Maharaj. But they offended Dhruva Maharaj. He was just an ordinary little boy, a little Kshatriya. He wasn't a pure devotee. But because he had become a pure devotee later on, they got the reaction of offending a pure devotee. So we had to be a little careful or else. We'll end there. Any questions? Could you imagine? I mean, all of us are going to become pure devotees eventually. So we have to be careful dealing with each other. Looking at the devotee at the level he's on now, and then becoming envious of them is very, very dangerous. Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj. Again, such a wonderful discourse. Maharaj, here we get to hear about how Kamsa's relationship with his sister, an affectionate relationship, very quickly deteriorated when his self-interest... Immediately, yeah. Literally in a moment. Spontaneously it switched, where he literally wanted to kill his own sister, who he was so affectionately disposed towards. So My question is about the manifestation of this anartha of hridaya daurbalyam, the weakness of heart. You know, and basically, he felt that he is not in a balanced relationship. He's going to be on the losing side in this relationship, so he wanted to secure his self-interest. Now, my question on that amongst sadhakas, between practicing devotees, is when the heart is not properly nourished by affection in devotee relationships, then even a small thing can lead to a dispute or an offensive behavior. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, it depends how you look at it. When Brahmananda and Gargamuni in especially in 61 Second Avenue, when they were all living in this temple, and because 26 Second Avenue, I mean, devotees live in the storefront, but it wasn't so fixed. But in 61 Second Avenue, where they moved after 26, then Brahmananda and Gargamuni were in charge. And they used to fight with each other all the time. It wasn't Vaikuntha all the time. And the devotees went to Prabhupada, because at that time Prabhupada was like the big father, he was the father, and everyone went to him to complain. They didn't go to the temple president so they said, these devotees are always fighting with each other. It's causing a disturbance. So Prabhupada said they're just like two pups from the same litter, just fighting with each other. It's not very serious. So the important thing is we shouldn't get in between two devotees, unless we have some position of authority that's our duty. Because the disputes even between the devotees are actually spiritual. And if we get in between, we might commit offenses, and we may be the one who's actually in Maya. It's like Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur said, we shouldn't get involved in disputes between husband and wife, because the one thing they'll agree with is that you're the problem. So you have to be careful in dealing with it. As far as, relations between devotees, of course, we're aspiring to become devotees. So sometimes it manifests itself in less than devotional ways. But if we can help out, bring them to the platform of, just like even in the spiritual world, which is not the same thing. Sometimes when Śrīmati Radharani rejects the devotee for some reason or another, and then the other devotees make arrangements, they come and help that devotee reestablish the relation with Śrīmati Radharani. So that should be our mentality. This is just a temporary thing, but we should try to improve it if we can, so that there's more harmony and peace again.
But Maharaj, when we witness, some devotees who say, in a public forum, they say offensive things towards...
Well, you could cut out their tongue. That's, according to the Bhagavatam, that's one, according to Nectar of Devotion, that's one alternative. You can cut out, the only problem is you have to commit suicide after doing it, especially if it's a Brahmin. On the other hand, you could try to defeat the devotee with logical arguments, or you can just go away. They're all in the Bhagavatam like that. I mean, when Shishupal was blaspheming Krishna, many of the Brahmins who couldn't do anything, or even the Kshatriyas, they fled the place, covering their ears because they couldn't hear their offenses. Others, like Bhima and others, they stood up with their swords. They were going to kill Shishupal. They were going to fight with him. But Krishna was very merciful. He cut off Shishupal's head because he didn't want to disturb the Rajasuya sacrifice. So there are alternatives, what you can do. Generally, it's not advised you cut people's tongues out. Try to defeat them with logical arguments, or else to leave the place.
Yes, Maharaj. I guess the final part of the question then is, okay, we understand, don't get into dispute, when there's disagreements between devotees or...
You can defeat them, if you can, but that's a little tricky, especially in a class. After class, you should probably mention it. Unless they're really offensive, then you might. I remember in New Vrindavan one time, this is 1970, I believe, or something like that. Prabhupada had just given sannyas to a number of the leaders in Los Angeles temple, and they left. And at that time, that's when he formed the GBC. I received in Buffalo, I was in Buffalo, and I got a phone call. I mean, we had a phone in the temple. No one ever used it. It was too expensive. We got a phone call, but I was in the room, so I answered the phone. I was also the treasurer, so I watched the phone so that people didn't use it. It cost too much. And I answered the phone, and it was Aravinda on the other side, and he said that Prabhupada wants to talk to Rupanuga, who's my temple president. So I got Rupanuga. Prabhupada got on the phone with him. I mean, that was really rare. Prabhupada never used the phone. And afterwards, I asked Rupanuga, what did Prabhupada say? Prabhupada wasn't actually Prabhupada at the time. Anyhow, he said that Prabhupada was crying, and he said they're trying to take the movement over. Come to Los Angeles immediately. So he left, and that was the first time he became a temple president, much to the much to the misfortune of the devotees in the temple. That was my first experience. And he went there, and there Prabhupada made those devotees who was concerned about sannyasis, and then he formed the GBC. So later on, the sannyasis left, and they went all the way across the country, all the way to New Vrindavan for Janmashtami. And I went there with Rupanuga, who's my GBC now. And one sannyasi, the sannyasi stood up during the meeting, they had classes, and he said, actually, you're all offenders, that Prabhupada was actually God, and you didn't recognize his God, so therefore he became disturbed and he left and went to Japan. And all the devotees were, one devotee stood up and said, but Prabhupada never said he was God. He said he was, and the sannyasi said, sit down. In any case, Rupanuga took me out of that. I was thinking, well, this is really, these are my heroes. Anyhow, later on, they were told to leave the movement. They went to, Prabhupada told them, the GBC at that time, told them to leave the movement, and they went to Detroit. And they were in Detroit when Prabhupada told them to leave the movement, or it told the GBC to tell them. And they hitchhiked all the way down to Florida. That's where I met them, in Florida. In any case, I forget what it is, but this is the, what was the question? What was part of the question I was answering?
I think my question was more on, when the heart is not nourished by affection and the offensive mentality because of that surfaces. I think you were responding to...
Yeah, and in any case, I guess you could say they were really quite offensive to Prabhupada. I mean, they were, because they were receiving letters from the devotees who had gone to India, how Prabhupada's godbrother was just saying that, this time Prabhupada was Prabhupada, they were saying that actually Swamiji had taken the title of Prabhupada. He was actually unqualified to do it. This was actually very offensive to Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati, etc., etc. And therefore, they started to become quite offensive to Prabhupada, and they were actually making plans, I guess, to take over the movement, because they thought that Prabhupada was just an ordinary person at that time. Some other crazy things were going on in Los Angeles, too. Anyways, later on, he gave them sannyas, and they went to, they got thrown out of the movement, and then they went down to Coconut Grove, and Prabhupada had asked me to open the temple, so my temple president sent me down to Coconut Grove to open a temple there, and I met them down there, but they were quite repentant. They had learned their lesson, and then Ramananda, because I had, they were sannyasis, and they were, show all respect. And Brahmananda said, he was not very happy I was showing him so much respect. And he said, actually, we made a mistake. We thought that Prabhupada was an ordinary person, but now actually what we meant was that he said was that Prabhupada was a servitor god. In other words, at least at that time he had realized that. So sometimes devotees commit offenses, they commit mistakes, but Krishna will correct it. The spiritual master will correct it. There's a lot of that happened in the beginning of the movement. Even New Vrindavan, that was my first experience with, when I came to the movement, devotees committing offenses against, because Kirtananda at that time, was the first sannyasi, but that was 68, before I had come. But he had come back, and at least I heard about that he had put on black after he came back as a sannyasi, and told all the devotees that Swamiji doesn't know how to expand Krishna consciousness. He's dressed in all these weird robes and things like that, and that we shouldn't follow him. And there's devotees were really disturbed. I mean, there was only a few devotees in the movement at that time, and a sannyasi, So they really rejected Kirtananda and Hare Griva, his friend. And in order to do that, they went to West Virginia, and they got this small property in West Virginia, near Moundsville, and they were going to start their own movement because Kirtananda was convinced that he knew how to do things better than Prabhupada did. So they were going to prove it, because Prabhupada said, if you know how to do things better, that's fine, but don't do it in the Hare Krishna movement. Start your own movement. So that's what they did. Hare Griva and Kirtananda went to West Virginia. They blooped. At that time we called it blooped, in order to start their own movement. But after a few months, they realized they're not getting anywhere. Could you imagine being in this isolated place called West Virginia with a bunch of hillbillies? And you're going to start the Hare Krishna movement there, better than Prabhupada did? So then they contacted Prabhupada and asked for forgiveness and asked to rejoin the Hare Krishna movement again. And Prabhupada went there and forgave them, I guess. And that's how we got New Vrindavan. It was all part of Krishna's plan, I guess. And I went there also. That's where I got my second initiation. Shortly after they started, after Prabhupada went there. I went there when Prabhupada was there, specifically because Prabhupada was there. I went there with two other devotees. One of them was, his name was Jagadish. He became a Mirage also. And another one was Bhaktibil and Bhakti Nareen, who became Krishna Bhamati and Bhagavan Das. And they got first initiation, got married, and Jagadish Prabhu and myself, we got second initiation. So anyhow, it was all part of Krishna's plan. Temporarily, probably even in his letter, he said, Kirtananda has become temporarily crazy. But it was just temporary. He did a lot of valuable service later on. Yes?
It's interesting that Lord Chaitanya, when he was criticized by Ramchandra Puri, he reduced his eating and maintained his respect always for Ramchandra Puri, because he was a
direct disciple of Ishwar.
Is a god.
Madhavendra Puri. He was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri.
That's right. Yeah. And that distressed the the devotees will smashing their head, because Ramchandra Puri could only see the faults in others, and in fact would create an environment where he would overfeed people, and they'd criticize them for overeating.
Do you know who he was in Krishna's pastimes, Ramachandra Puri?
Who?
Jatila.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Lord Chaitanya offered him a great deal of respect and acquiesced to his criticism, his unwarranted criticism. And that's, as you were saying, Prabhupada said, they criticise Lord Chaitanya, where, you know, be prepared for criticism. And it's interesting to see how Prabhupada then managed the immaturity of his disciples. Yet he was sometimes very firm, you know, and strong with them, and in one sense didn't acquiesce as Lord Chaitanya did. And I guess they were juniors. Ramchandra was a senior, right? And his Prabhupada's disciples obviously were juniors, and so should always have taken instruction from him.
As a point of information, it said also sometimes Lord Chaitanya treated Ramachandra Puris like straw on the street.
What was that?
Sometimes, according to sometimes it said in Chaitanya Charitamrita also that sometimes in the dealings, Lord Chaitanya treated Ramachandra Puris like straw on the street.
Ignored him.
Ignored him, yeah.
Yeah.
But in this major thing, when he saw the ants crawling in the Gambhira, and he criticized him for being, you know, eating secret sweets at night. Yeah. Then he did that as an example, but he didn't always take him so seriously.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see how Prabhupada was adept at managing his disciples, and sometimes chastised them, and then other times encouraged them. And they must have been creating headaches for him. Otherwise, why would he call Rupanuga and say how much distress he was experiencing? You know, there's this notion that Prabhupada just kind of glided through everything and everything was perfect, but it wasn't. It was a huge challenge to establish ISKCON and to manage basically neophytes who on occasion respected him and then on other occasions just ignored his good counsel. So quite the lesson for us to be very tolerant. Lord Chaitanya was tolerant, and Prabhupada was also tolerant of a lot of immaturity more than anything, as opposed to insincerity, because all those devotees are actually very sincere. They'd given up everything for Prabhupada.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Hare.